When you think about the pop groups that came out of the early 2000s, you almost expect a certain kind of story. There's the formation, this meteoric rise, then the inevitable infighting, and the breakup.
It's a very familiar arc.
It is, but with the Pussycat Dolls, that trajectory is just different. It's warped. Because you quickly realize they were never really a band in the way we usually think of one.
No, not at all. They were a business entity, a brand. The music was almost secondary to the intellectual property.
And that's such a critical distinction to make right from the start. Most groups, they start in a garage or they're put together by a label to fill a specific niche.
Right, but the Pussycat Dolls were already a successful thing. They were a burlesque troupe that got, or lack of a better term, reverse engineered into a global pop act.
And that origin story, that foundation, it created this fundamental tension that just never went away, this push and pull between the brand and the actual talent.
It's what made them so successful at first. But it also, I think, guaranteed that they would eventually collapse.
And we're not just talking about a messy breakup with statements to the press. This ended up in court, the Los Angeles Superior Court, to be exact.
The timeline is just staggering when you lay it all out. It starts in a nightclub back in 1995.
It's 1995.
Yeah.
And it runs all the way to a legal settlement that was just finalized in late 2024. That's almost 3 decades of history.
And for a huge chunk of that time, there was no music. The name, the brand, it was just existing in this weird limbo of litigation and failed negotiations.
So I think that's what we need to unpack here. We need to trace that entire line from this small dance review at the Viper Room to this global franchise and really dig into the legal and financial structures that made the members feel more like employees than artists.
Disposable employees even, which is a recurring theme.
Let's start at the very beginning then. The time and the place. Los Angeles, 1995. The Viper Room on the Sunset Strip.
And you have to understand what the Viper Room was in the mid-90s. It was partly owned by Johnny Depp. It had this reputation for being very rock and roll, very exclusive.
Gritty, even. It was the absolute heart of the grunge and alternative rock scene.
Which is exactly why the Pussycat Dolls were so jarring and so brilliant in that context. The founder, choreographer Robin Anton, she wasn't trying to fit in with that grunge aesthetic at all.
She was actively pushing against it.
Absolutely. The whole concept was a modern take on burlesque. She was looking backwards to the 1950s and 60s. The music was old pop standards, jazz classics. The look was lingerie, pinup costumes. It was pure theater.
And they secured a residency there, a Thursday night slot, which they held from 1995 all the way to 2001.
Just think about that. A 6-year residency. In a city like LA that is constantly, relentlessly chasing the next new thing, that is an eternity.
How did they manage to keep it fresh for that long?
Well, this is the first real piece of evidence for that brand over band idea. The lineup was completely fluid. It was a revolving door of talent.
So it wasn't about coming to see a specific set of 5 or 6 performers.
Exactly. From 95 to 2003, the cast was always changing. Dancers would come and go. Guest vocalists would drop in for a few shows. It was a review. The audience was there for the Pussycat Dolls experience itself, not for any one person.
The guest stars certainly didn't hurt. They were a huge draw.
A massive draw. You had people like Christine Applegate, who was a huge television star at the time. Carla Kama was another regular. It became this, cool insider thing for celebrities to do, a place to go and live out this sort of cabaret fantasy for a night.
And that celebrity cosign is what really started to accelerate their visibility beyond just the LA club scene.
It put them on the media's radar. And in June of 1999, they got a major national spotlight.
The Playboy pictorial.
Yes. 7 members of the troupe posed for a spread. And that took the visual identity of the group, the look, the aesthetic, and it exported it to the entire country. It really established the Pussycat Dolls look long before most people had ever heard them sing a single note.
And around this time, we have to talk about Carmen Electra. Because in this pre-recording era, she really becomes the public face of the whole operation.
She becomes the lead performer for a lot of the shows, especially as they get bigger. They move from the Viper Room to the Roxy Theater in 2002.
A much larger venue. That's a clear signal that the business is scaling up.
For sure. And with a star like Carmen Electra front and center, they start booking major television appearances. They performed on The Late Show with David Letterman in November 2002.
I actually looked up that performance. They did Big Spender and the Pink Panther theme. It was 100% cabaret. There was no hint of pop music.
None whatsoever. They were also starting to break into movies. Small parts, but significant. They were in a film called Matters of Consequence back in '98.
Right, and then the much bigger one, Charlie's Angels. full throttle in 2003.
And they even appeared in the music video for Pink's song Trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So you see, they were already a successful Hollywood commodity. They were this very specific visual product that you could insert into a movie or a TV show to add a certain flavor.
But they were not a recording act.
Not yet. And that pivot, the decision to turn them into a music group, seems to have come entirely from the outside, from the music industry looking in.
It wasn't the dancers deciding to write an album. It was Interscope Records taking notice.
It was Jimmy Iovine and Ron Fair. I mean, these are absolute titans of the music industry.
Two of the biggest names you could find at the time.
And the catalyst, the story that's always told, involves another huge pop star, Gwen Stefani.
She was asked to perform with the troupe.
Right. And seeing a genuine chart-topping pop star on stage with the dancers, it apparently sparked an idea in Jimmy Iovine's mind. He saw a brand that was already recognizable, that already had this built-in cool factor.
And he realized he could attach pop music to that visual engine and sell it to a mass audience.
It was a branding exercise from day one.
Mm-hmm.
But to make that transition from a loose burlesque troupe to a tightly packaged pop group, it meant they had to completely restructure the personnel.
And this is where the business side of it starts to get really harsh. You mentioned Carmen Electra was the face of the group. She was the star. But she doesn't make that jump to the recording act.
She doesn't. And the reason she gave is incredibly telling. It shines a huge light on the kind of financial deal that was on the table.
What did she say?
She said publicly that she just couldn't afford to join the new music project. She called it a sacrifice she couldn't make.
Wow. That implies the contract Interscope was offering was, what, a standard new artist deal?
Almost certainly. Which means a low upfront advance, which is recoupable against all future earnings. For an established celebrity like Carmen Electra, taking that deal would have meant a colossal pay cut.
And a total loss of her autonomy. She'd go from being a star guest to a new signee on a group contract, so she walked.
She walked away, which meant they had to build a new lineup. They kept a core of the dancers from the troupe days.
Robin Anton, of course, as the founder. And then you had Carmit Bachar, Sia Batten, Casey Campbell, Ashley Roberts, Jessica Sutta, and Kimberly Wyatt.
But Interscope, and specifically Ron Fair, looked at that roster of dancers and decided it wasn't enough to build a pop group around.
He was pretty blunt about it in his later interviews.
Very blunt. He said the original troupe members had adequate voices. And you know that in producer speak, adequate is not a compliment.
No, it's a death sentence.
Yeah.
For a pop act that's meant to dominate global radio, adequate is not going to cut it. He said he needed ability.
So they didn't just put the dancers in vocal training. They went out and they specifically headhunted singers.
A completely separate audition process.
Yes. And this is how Nicole Scherzinger and Melody Thornton come into the picture. They were recruited for one reason: their voices. Scherzinger especially. She had already been in a group called Eden's Crush from a reality TV show.
So she was a known quantity. She had a voice that could actually carry a whole album.
And right there, from the very first day of the new lineup, you have a two-tier system baked into the group's DNA.
You have the legacy members, the dancers, who are there because they embody the visual history and the brand of the troupe.
And then you have the new members who are there purely to deliver the audio product, the singers.
And that division, that
Yep.
that bifurcation is the source of basically every single conflict that comes later.
Absolutely. When you look at the photos of that final lineup, Scherzinger, Bachar, Roberts, Sutta, Thornton, and Wyatt, they look like a cohesive unit.
They look like a band.
But behind the scenes, contractually, functionally, they were operating in two completely different lanes.
So the debut album, PCD, is released in September 2005. And from a commercial standpoint, I mean, the strategy worked better than anyone could have imagined.
The numbers are just staggering. It sold 3 million copies in the United States alone, over 1.2 million in the UK. It was a monster.
And the hits were relentless. Don't Cha went to #1 in 15 countries, I think. It hit #2 on the Billboard Hot 100 here.
Then you had Stick With-To, which even got a Grammy nomination for Best Pop Performance.
Which is a level of critical acknowledgement you don't always see for a group that was so heavily manufactured.
And then Buttons with Snoop Dogg. That was a global phenomenon. They were also, and this is important, really at the forefront of the digital music revolution.
In what way?
They were the first all-female group in history to have 3 different singles, Don't Cha Buttons, and When I Grow Up, crossed the 2 million mark in digital sales. They understood that new marketplace very early on.
They're also maximizing the brand in ways that, a typical rock band just wouldn't. They were a franchise.
Oh, completely. They opened the Pussycat Dolls Lounge at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. They had a signature makeup line with the brand Stila. They were everywhere.
They even recorded a version of Don't Cha in Simlish, the fictional language from the Sims video games.
And that Simlish recording is a perfect little microcosm of their business model. The brand was so flexible, so modular, that you could just as easily slot it into a video game as you could a nightclub or a top 40 radio station.
But as their profile got bigger and they entered this mainstream space, the core of their brand, its very open sexuality, started to create friction.
The thing that made them famous in the first place started to become a liability in certain markets.
We saw that very clearly with the Hasbro toy deal.
Right. Hasbro, the toy company, had this plan to create a line of dolls for children based on the group. On paper, it's a logical merchandising step. Pop stars and dolls go together.
But it fell apart.
It fell apart very quickly. A number of parent advocacy groups lobbied Hasbro really aggressively, arguing that the group's overtly sexual nature, their lyrics, their costumes, made them completely inappropriate for a children's toy line.
And Hasbro caved. They scrapped the entire plan.
It showed that there was a hard ceiling on just how far you could push that burlesque aesthetic into the family-friendly, mainstream corporate world.
They ran into a similar wall, a much more literal one, on tour in Malaysia.
That was in 2006. They had a concert scheduled in Kuala Lumpur. Now, Malaysia has very strict public decency laws that govern live performances.
And the Pussycat Dolls stage show did not meet those standards.
Not even close. The concert promoters were fined what amounted to about $3,000 because the group's eye-popping attire and sexually suggestive stage routines were deemed to be in violation of local laws.
It's a classic example of a global brand clashing with local cultural standards.
Exactly. But while the brand was out there conquering the world and occasionally getting fined, the internal dynamics of the group itself were really starting to deteriorate.
The critics were already pointing it out. I remember a review in Entertainment Weekly that flat out called them a brand, not a band.
But the reality of what was happening in the recording studio was actually far more extreme than even the critics knew at the time.
We really have to dig into the recording process for these albums. Because in a normal group, even one with a clear lead singer, the other members are usually involved. They're singing harmonies, backing vocals, ad-libs.
Sure, they're present in the room. In the Pussycat Dolls, Nicole Scherzinger's vocal dominance was almost absolute.
She talked about it years later in a behind-the-music television special, and the numbers she gave were just unbelievable.
She claimed she sang 95% of all the vocals on the albums.
95%, and that's not just the lead vocal.
Oh, that's the crucial part. That figure includes all the background harmonies, all the layers. She described this process where she would go into the studio, record the main vocal line, and then just layer her own voice over and over again to create the harmonies.
She said that often she would have the entire song finished, every vocal part, before the other 5 members of the group had even heard the track.
Just let that sink in.
Yeah.
So if you're Ashley Roberts or Jessica Suda or Kimberly Wyatt, what is your actual role in the creation of the music?
According to their accounts, it was virtually zero. Ashley Roberts used a sports analogy that I think is really telling. She said they were treated like a football team, and Nicole was the quarterback.
But it was more extreme than that. She also claimed that in interviews, they were often explicitly told not to speak. They were there as visual accompaniment, while Nicole provided the voice and the official answers.
Critics started describing them as window dressing or glorified backup dancers.
And can you imagine how that must have felt for Melody Thornton?
Oh, that's a particularly rough situation. Because she was brought into the group specifically as a singer. She was supposed to be the other vocalist alongside Nicole.
She was the other person Ron Fair brought in for her ability. And she does have some vocal moments on the tracks, some ad-libs and runs. But as time went on, her role was minimized more and more as the label decided to put all of its focus, all of its resources behind Scherzinger.
So she joins the group with the expectation that she's going to be a singer in a pop group.
And she finds herself in essentially the same position as the dancers she was hired to supplement. She was there to look good in the videos.
And all of this simmering tension, it finally just boils over during the era of their second album, Doll Domination.
That was 2008. And the first major crack in the facade appears even before the album comes out. In March of 2008, Karmit Bachar leaves the group.
And she was significant because she was the longest-serving member. She was the one remaining link all the way back to the 1995 Viper Room days.
The official reason given was that she wanted to pursue a solo career, which is the standard line. But later, she was more open about the group tensions and this feeling of being constantly underappreciated.
So she's gone. The group is now a five-piece. And Doll Domination comes out in September 2008. It had big hits. When I Grow Up was huge. It won a VMA for the choreography in the video.
It did. But the album as a whole did not perform nearly as well as the debut. The sales figures tell the story.
What was the drop-off?
It was significant. In a key market like the UK, Doll Domination sold less than 1/6 of what PCD had sold. That's a massive decline.
So the novelty was wearing off. The public was maybe getting a little tired of the formula?
That, and the market itself was changing. But the real death blow to the group wasn't the album sales. It was a dispute over billing, over a song credit.
The now infamous Jai-Ho incident.
This is such a crucial moment. The film Slumdog Millionaire is a global sensation, and its theme song, Jai-Ho, is everywhere. The label sees an opportunity.
A huge opportunity.
So Nicole Scherzinger is asked to go into the studio and record a new English-language pop version of the song to release as a single.
And when the track is finally released, the artist credit doesn't just say the Pussycat Dolls.
No. The official credit reads, A.R. Rahman and the Pussycat Dolls featuring Nicole Scherzinger.
That one little word, featuring, it legally and publicly separates her from the rest of the group. It makes her a guest star on a record by her own band.
It was the ultimate confirmation of the hierarchy that everyone had suspected for years. It was now written right there on the packaging. And the reaction from the other members was, well, explosive.
This is when Melody Thornton had that public outburst on stage.
Yes. During a tour stop in Phoenix, she grabbed the microphone and started talking directly to the audience, venting her frustrations about her role in the group and not getting to showcase her voice. It was the moment all that private, backstage drama spilled out into the public performance itself.
After that, it was really just a matter of time. The group went on a hiatus after the tour finished, but it was clear this was more than just a break.
It was a dissolution. By February of 2010, it was a mass exodus. Jessica Soto was out, Ashley Roberts was out, Kimberly Wyatt and Melody Thornton were out.
Kimberly Wyatt was the one who made the definitive statement, wasn't she?
She was. She just came out and said it. The group has fully disbanded. There was no ambiguity.
And Nicole Scherzinger officially left later that same year to finally launch her solo career.
Robin Anton, who still owned the brand and the name, tried to reboot it. She put together a completely new lineup of all new members.
They even had a GoDaddy commercial during the Super Bowl in 2011.
They did. But the public just wasn't interested. It was a clear demonstration that while Anton owned the trademark, the actual product that people wanted was that specific combination of those 6 women from the hit-making era.
So that new group eventually had to rebrand itself. They became the group GRL.
Exactly. They had to shed the Pussycat Dolls name because it came with too much baggage and an expectation they couldn't meet. It proved the brand wasn't as modular as they thought.
And then, silence. For almost a decade, the brand was dormant. But in 2017, rumors started swirling. Social media accounts popped up.
The machine started cranking up again. And in November of 2019, it was made official. 5 of the 6 classic members were reuniting for a tour.
The lineup was Bachar, Roberts, Scherzinger, Suta, and Wyatt.
The notable absence was Melody Thornton. She released a statement saying she appreciated the offer, but that the time was not right for her to return.
Which, given her history with the group, is completely understandable.
Absolutely. So the 5 of them launched this big comeback with a high-profile performance on the finale of The X Factor, Celebrity in the UK. They performed a medley of their old hits and a new song called React.
React was then released as an official single in February of 2020. The comeback was in full swing, the tour was booked, and then the world shut down.
The timing was just catastrophic. The COVID-19 pandemic hits, and mass gatherings are canceled everywhere. The tour gets postponed from 2020 to 2021.
And then it gets postponed again.
But while the pandemic was this external force that nobody could control, it seems like it created the pressure cooker environment for all those old, unresolved business disputes to boil over once again.
And in January of 2022, the tour was officially canceled for good. But the way it was canceled tells you everything you need to know about the state of their internal communication.
It was a disaster. Nicole Scherzinger announced the cancellation herself via a post to her Instagram story.
Not an official press release from the group or the promoter, an Instagram story.
And shortly after her post went up, Jessica Soto and Karmit Bachar released a joint statement of their own. saying that they had no idea the tour was canceled. They found out about it from the fan reaction to Nicole's Instagram post.
They found out at the same time as the general public.
It's just an astonishing level of dysfunction. And that public breakdown led directly to the lawsuit. Robin Antin versus Nicole Scherzinger, filed in Los Angeles Superior Court.
This is where we finally get a real look under the hood at the actual business agreements that govern this reunion.
The lawsuit all centered on what's called a Memorandum of Understanding, an MOU. It's essentially the initial agreement that laid out the terms of the reunion.
And according to Robin Antin's court filing, what did that original agreement say about Scherzinger's share?
The original MOU allegedly gave Nicole Scherzinger 49% of the earnings and profits from the new venture, PCD Worldwide.
49%. For one member. That leaves just 51% to be split between Robin Antin and the other 4 performing members.
It shows you exactly how the business was structured. Scherzinger wasn't just a member, she was a major shareholder. But the dispute, according to Antin's complaint, was that Scherzinger was now refusing to participate in the tour unless that deal was renegotiated.
And what were the new terms that she was allegedly demanding?
Antin's lawsuit claimed that Scherzinger was now demanding her share be increased from 49% to 75%.
75%. At that point, you're not a partner, you're the majority owner.
And just as importantly, she was also demanding full creative control over the entire venture.
So what was Scherzinger's defense against this?
Her legal team's response was that the original MOU from 2019 was no longer valid. They argued that because of all the pandemic-related delays, the terms of the deal had lapsed.
So they needed a new contract.
They argued a new deal was required to reflect the new reality. Their position was that committing to this delayed tour would require Scherzinger to forego other new opportunities that had come up in the intervening years. Essentially, they argued the price of her time and her participation had gone up. They called Antin's lawsuit ludicrous and false.
There was also a financial component involving the tour promoter, Live Nation.
Yes. Live Nation had apparently advanced $600,000 to Antin's company to cover the initial setup costs for the tour. The lawsuit alleged that Scherzinger's refusal to participate put Antin in a position where she couldn't repay that advance.
So it painted a picture of one side being under significant financial pressure.
And the other side using that leverage to negotiate a more favorable deal. It was a classic hardball business negotiation that just happened to spill out into the public record.
And this legal fight dragged on for over 2 years, but it was recently resolved.
It was. In November of 2024, it was reported that the two parties had reached a settlement. The specific terms, as you'd expect, were not disclosed.
But what was interesting was what Scherzinger said afterwards.
Very interesting. After the settlement was announced, she made a public statement saying she would be open to another reunion in the future.
Which suggests that despite all the legal accusations, the door isn't completely shut. The business of the Pussycat Dolls could, theoretically, be revived yet again.
The brand is resilient, if nothing else.
And throughout this whole messy reunion attempt, that original point of contention, the group's sexual image, came right back to the forefront.
It never went away. That comeback performance on The X Factor in 2019, where they wore these black PVC outfits.
I remember that.
That performance generated over 400 complaints to Ofcom, which is the UK's broadcasting regulator. Viewers were calling in to complain that it was too raunchy for a family television show.
And then there was that incredibly awkward interview they did on the Australian TV show The Project in 2020. The hosts just kept pressing them on whether their dance moves were appropriate.
And the members have a very consistent defense for this. They frame it as female empowerment.
Nicole Scherzinger and Kimberly Wyatt in particular have drawn parallels to contemporary artists like Lizzo, arguing that what they're doing is about body awareness and owning their power and sexuality.
Kimberly Wyatt called them warriors, and even mentioned that she brings her own children to rehearsals so they can see their mother on stage, owning her space.
But we have to be clear that not everyone who was involved with the group shares that empowered perspective. There are much darker allegations out there.
We have to mention the claims made by Kaya Jones. She was a member of the group for a short time, before the big 2005 commercial breakthrough.
She left in 2004, and years later she made some extremely serious allegations.
She did. She alleged on social media that the group was essentially a front for a prostitution ring, and that members of the group were abused by industry figures.
It's a horrifying claim.
It is, and it is very important that we state that these claims were publicly and vehemently denied by both Robin Antin and the other members of the group. But the fact that an allegation that's severe even exists adds a very dark and complicated layer to this whole conversation about empowerment versus exploitation in the music industry.
So when we step back and try to assess the group's legacy, it's this incredibly complex picture. On one hand, the commercial success is just undeniable.
The numbers don't lie. 55 million records sold worldwide. They are, by sales, one of the most successful girl groups of all time. Billboard magazine ranked them the 80th most successful musical act of the entire 2000s decade.
So you have this clear, documented pattern. A local burlesque troupe is identified as a viable brand. That brand is attached to pop music and becomes a global phenomenon.
But the internal structure, which prioritizes one member over all the others, causes the band to implode.
That hierarchy then becomes the basis for a multi-million-dollar lawsuit when they try to reunite.
And the lawsuit ends in a confidential settlement that, bizarrely, leaves the door open for the whole cycle to potentially start over again.
It really brings you to that classic philosophical question, the ship of Theseus. If you keep replacing the parts, is it still the same ship?
Exactly. If you replace the dancers, is it still the Pussycat Dolls? The GRL experiment suggests no. If you remove the lead singer, does the brand have any value left at all? The lawsuit suggests probably not.
It seems the history shows that while the trademark, the name itself, belongs to Robin Anton, the actual value was created by that very specific, very volatile chemistry of that 2005 lineup.
You can't just plug new people into the costume and the brand and expect the public to accept it. It's a real case study in the absolute limits of manufactured pop.
You can manufacture an image, you can manufacture the songs, but you cannot manufacture the human chemistry that holds it all together.
And you definitely can't sustain it when the members feel, at their core, that they're just temporary employees renting a space inside someone else's business.
Thanks for listening.